Hello Year 10. Today I'm going to be showing you how to use our West End data to create some representations. So in your report, you're trying to prove that gentrification is occurring in West End. So we need to prove that it is actually happening, and we need to show what the challenges or the effects are because of gentrification. If you're unsure about what that word means, gentrification, you need to go back to our previous lessons and go through the PowerPoints to fully understand it. Because it's no point trying to create these graphs without having a good understanding of what gentrification is. So, here is our data. You'll be able to access this through the QLearn. It is all available in week 3, lesson 2. So, with this data here, basically I have put all your data into on the left hand column, your participants, so people who you actually interviewed, you'll see it keeps going all the way down to 58. Okay. We also have the desirability measurement. So there was a question on how desirable West End is. It was ranked from 1 to 5, 5 being the most desirable. We have access to public amenities. So public amenities, we're thinking things like libraries, schools, shopping centres, things like that. Things that the public can have access to. There was a question on that, 5 again being the highest access to public amenities. We have architectural attractiveness. So some people might like to move to certain areas based on the architecture. In West End, we have a mixture of architecture. We have the old traditional Queensland style houses, and we have the newer style, more modern apartment buildings. So people's rankings on architectural attractiveness are probably going to be quite varied, but we'll be able to see that when we look at our data. 5 was the most attractive to 1 the least attractive. We have building quality. The reason I have building quality here as a question, the reason we have collected that data, is because we can have, when we have gentrification and we have these new buildings being constructed, a lot of the time they're being constructed for purposes of reselling. So the highest profit margins are what these developers are after. Because of that, there could be quite big impacts on the build quality of these new apartment buildings. So we wanted to collect some data on the build quality. This is something you do not have to use if you don't want to, but it's good for us to collect this data because we're unlikely to find it on the internet. So we just have it here if that's something you want to talk about as an impact of gentrification. And we have housing affordability. This is the one that most people are likely to use. So housing affordability is obviously an impact of gentrification. What we'll find is as the place is gentrified and it is catered for people of a mid to high income range, the housing in the area will become more expensive as more people want to move in. So we have that ranked as well. With our housing affordability ranking, the numbers there can be a little bit hard to decipher what they mean. So just make sure you go back to your book because with housing affordability, 1 means it's the most affordable, so it's very affordable. 5 means it is completely unaffordable. Okay, so just don't get them mixed up. Then we have our housing tenure, so who rents, who owns, and then we have other as well. We have NIMBYism. So with NIMBYism, it means not in my backyard. So with that, people were talking about whether they were opposed to these new buildings being built. So these mid to high-rise apartment buildings. So how against that they were. We have survey location. Now, not many people actually entered this data in. I've just written exactly what you wrote on your paper. So I think with our survey location and work, because it is so incomplete and because the what people have written is not really consistent, it's probably going to be unusable. But I've put it there anyway if that's something you wanted to try and use. Now, if you scroll down to the bottom, I have the averages here for each of our scores. I also totaled up the rentals, owners, and the others for housing tenure. You'll see we have the age cohorts here as well. We have the school age dependents, employment status, and West End residents. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is graph the averages. If you go down to the bottom, you'll see there is a tab called averages. You click on that. Here you can see the average of desirability, access to public amenities, attractiveness, quality, affordability, and NIMBYism. What we're going to do with this is that we're going to place it into a graph. All you have to do is you highlight all of it, you go to insert. With that, you can, on here, you have all your graphs. Now, you can choose to make it something simple, like a column graph. The more simple your graph is, the harder it is to gain marks. You're going to be marked, okay, so if it's just for one of the criteria, you're marked on your sophistication of graphs and maps. The more harder they are to create, the more marks you can earn. So let's say you're going for a column like this. This column graph would not be counted as sophisticated. You wouldn't get the highest amount of marks. In order to increase the marks, you would have to show the data in a more complex way, or you would have to add things like annotations or photos on your graph to try and improve it. We're going to go for one that would be considered more complex. So you just go to this one and, oh, sorry, not that one. We're going to go to, where is it? Oh, here we go. We click on this one and we're going to go down to a radar graph. Okay. When you click this, here we have our averages and it shows with our averages the desirability, access, and everything else. So all our variables. Now with this, you make sure you change your title, right? Your title should state exactly what this is. So you would have the word average in there. So averages of um, participants survey ratings of West End. Right, let's say something like that. If I thought about it a bit longer, maybe we can make a better one. But let's say just something like that for now. So then with that, you can change the color and such. See with our style, we can change the style of it. Please don't just use what it first comes up with. Go through the styles, try and make your one stand out. Whatever style you go with or a color scheme you end up going with, make sure you keep that consistent throughout your report. We don't want one graph with a black background and the next one with a white background. Okay, we want to try and keep it consistent and we want to try and mimic the professionalism of real life ones you would see. So there is one type of graph, okay? A radar. Another graph we can make is we can compare the relationship between multiple variables. Now, if you go to this section here at the bottom, you'll see I have changed our data very slightly. The only reason for that is because we want to create something called a scatter plot. A scatter plot proves if there is a relationship between two variables. So all you do is highlight it all, you go insert, you go for this one here, and then you have scatter. So the reason I had to change our data very slightly is that we had whole numbers. Let's say we have the number 4 and it appears 7 times. What that means is, with our data, these dots would be on top of each other and we wouldn't be able to see how many people have scored the same score. Okay? But we want to see that. So we want to see where there's clusters. Like here, we can see there's a cluster. But we can't see that if they're just placed on top of each other. So I haven't changed it much. All I've done is, let's say this was 4, I just changed it to 4.1. Or I might change it to 4.05 or something like that. So it's essentially the exact same number. It's just that we can at least see that clustering's occurring. Okay? Doesn't matter if it's a tad off, like I have done, as long as we can see the trend and relationships here. So with the graph, once you've made it, you need to make it big. So you need to zoom it out just so we can see all those individual dots. What we need on here is we need to follow our SALT. So we need our axes titles, and this title that Excel will give you is incorrect. So you need to create an actual title. So I might just write desirability versus access to public amenities in West End. Okay, there we go. Then make sure we have our axes titles as well. Now with our axes titles, we want to make sure that the correct axes are being shown. So what I do, I just hover over a point. This is 3.1 and 3.02. Actually, maybe not that one. I'll do a different point. This one here. 4.3 and 3.05. So 4.3 is this one here. So I just have to look on here where there's 4.3. Oh, there it is, desirability. So desirability is going to be my x-axis. And then that means my y-axis is going to be access to public amenities. Cool. Now with this one, what it gives you initially is, in my opinion, the worst version of it. If you just go and look at the different styles, there's way better ones. I like this one personally. I feel like you can see this big clustering here. And that's what you're going to be talking about, is you would talk about describing the distribution of people who think that West End is desirable and who think that West End has good access to public amenities. Because what we want to see is that if there's a relationship between the two. So we can see that a lot of people score highly on access to public amenities. A lot of people think that West End has access to them. And because of that, people think that West End's very desirable, a good place to live. And so we can see that relationship. As one increases, so does the other. With this as well, you need to put a trend line in as well. Okay, so there's our trend line. We can see that there is a strong relationship as a trend line has a noticeable upturn like that. So yeah, as one increases, so does the other. If they were to decrease, so would the other. So if we had less access to public amenities, the place would be less desirable. So we would create this to help introduce a challenge. The challenge would be housing affordability. That's the next one I'm going to show. So here, it's just the same thing. This time it's the variables are desirability and housing affordability. Again, we just highlight them. We go insert and we just do a scatter plot. We make it large. Okay. We'll go for the same style. We can see that this one, it's not as clear cut with the relationship. It's not as strong. So it doesn't necessarily mean that because the place is more desirable, the houses are more unaffordable. There's a small link, but it's not necessarily the strongest one. But we're going to talk about it anyway, because we can then find other data on the internet to suggest what other causes are happening to make it more unaffordable. So we'll be looking at population increase as well later on. So again, you need to change your title, so that's up to you to do. Do your axes labels, and then eventually when you cut this out and you paste it into your report, you'll need to also put a source, so where you got this information from. What you would do is you would just type for the source West End field trip data. So now you should have a scatter plot of desirability and housing affordability, a scatter plot of desirability and access to public amenities. You should have a radar graph of your averages. Then after that, I would like you to go back to all your data here and think about what other things you might want to show. Is there any other relationships that you think are worth showing with all your variables here? Or maybe you might want to look at some of the stuff down here. You might just want to graph some simple things. So, for instance, West End residents, how many said yes, how many said no? If we had heaps of people in West End and they weren't residents, that could be increasing the demand for housing in the area, because maybe they are around there because they like the area, or maybe they're around West End at that time because they work there. So that likely will increase the demand for housing. And so that could also be a cause for gentrification, because so many people want to move there, they want to redevelop houses to high-rise apartment buildings. So you could even graph something simple like that. You might want to graph employment status and try and make a relationship between a cause or an effect. We got school age dependence. Now, why would that be important? Well, around West End, you have the Brisbane Public School there. It is the high school, and it's, from memory, it's like the best or the second best school in the entire state. It is a public school, so essentially it's free. And so many people try and move into the area so they can send their kids there. So we can see that there is a lot of people who have children. So that could even be a reason to gentrify the area, or a reason why there's increased demand in the area. So you may want to graph that. If you graph this, for instance, it will come out very basic. So let's say you graph it as a column, because this is definitely the only graph that kind of makes sense, or maybe a pie chart, for instance. So let's say you graph it as a pie chart. This is super basic. What you would have to do is you would have to add photos around it to make it more sophisticated. So a photo of maybe the Brisbane school, and then maybe some little annotations, little comments saying, you know, best school in the state, with some statistics, right, to prove that. Then it becomes more sophisticated because it shows more information, it shows more relationships. So that's how you can cheat your way to a more sophisticated graph. You can do a basic one, but then you add annotations and photos around it. Okay. We also have age cohort here. If you wanted to try and prove a relationship between age and gentrification. So we can see that there's not too many older people over the age of 65, people who are likely to be near retired in West End. That is likely because we're near the city where you have a lot of younger professionals, and so we can kind of see that in the data set. Okay, so because a lot of more younger people live here, the reason could be the proximity to the city and the access to those public amenities like public transport to get into the city. So feel free to create as many graphs as you can. It's better to just have heaps more, because you can merge some together to make them more sophisticated as well. Okay, so that's it from me. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you for watching.